Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my build guide for the final masterpiece pistol. Now, I do apologize for this guide taking a while. I originally built this weapon and then canned the video because this weapon was simply breaking the game. Showing on screen should be a clip of me using it in 400% dungeons, and we found that if we use the toxic attack on it, it was kind of doing that glitch where if you were doing too much damage or damage numbers were happening too quickly in the game, the game couldn't keep up with the damage numbers. It was kind of an issue that we had on Jaber, where you could basically have damage numbers in a queue. So even after you stopped shooting, you would still be getting damage numbers to show on screen. And it was so bad with the final masterpiece because you could scale fire rate and all of the dots stacked that you could have 50 dots sticking on one character, but in a huge area. It got so bad with the final masterpiece that it broke enemy AI so that you could, the enemies did not fight anymore. Enemies got more broken using the toxic element on this thing than they would just using the freeze element and freezing things. So I personally decided to can the video, and I wasn't going to make anything about it because I just thought it was kind of stupid. But in the most recent hotfix / patch, they did fix that, so now you can use the gun as normal, and it's actually usable. And so now I do want to talk about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. So the final masterpiece did get reworked. It used to be a little bit of a kind of slot roulette gambling type deal with your buffs that you were going to be getting on your weapon. Now it just has 4 different modes that all trigger different elemental effects that are all pretty created equal. There are better ones than others, but basically after you reload, you get a random element of 4 unique ability effects. We've got Exploding Ecstasy, Restrained Dispassion, Pulsing Shock, and Endless Indulgence, and these are going to give you either fire damage triggered in a radius, chill damage triggered in a radius, shock damage triggered in a radius, or poison damage triggered in a radius. The big interesting thing with poison is that it doesn't do outward damage. For example, the cold does an explosion of 50% of your firearm damage to nearby enemies. The poison doesn't do the explosion, but it does drop a it does drop a puddle on the ground that ticks every 1 second for 3% of your firearm damage. And then the puddle also procs poison that ticks every 0.5 seconds for 7% of your firearm damage. I think all of these numbers happening very quickly is what was breaking this weapon originally. But poison actually works out best on this weapon for single targets, and the other modes are really good for mobbing. But technically, in terms of DPS per second, because you can stack the poisons, if you are going to shoot this thing at a single target, I do recommend going for poison. If you're going to be using it for mobbing, I personally like the frostbite. So in terms of scaling this weapon is also very hard to scale its damage up, just like the perforator, where your on-hit damage is not actually increasing the damage of the elemental effects that are going out. Just to do a quick test of this, here is our stock weapon with nothing on it. If we shoot this guy in the head... Oh, let me swap this to poison real quick. All right, we're on poison now. So if we shoot him in the head, our poison is going to tick for 2,699 on him. You can see it's ticking for the exact same amount on that guy. And just to run through some quick mod breakdowns, if we put on weak point sight, now with this mod on, we shoot him in the head, pop poison, it's going to tick for the exact same amount, 2,699. So no damage increase from weak point. Well, what if we add toxic damage? So now let's add toxic enhancement. This gives us 30% toxic increase on this weapon. As you can see, our dot did not change on that. So even with toxic on and us doing that toxic damage, that doesn't change anything. So 30% increased firearm damage, not improving our damage at all, which is pretty wild. And then now let's, just for the sake of it, let's put on poison priority. This gives us 50% more toxic attack. Now we shoot this guy, and we are going to be getting the exact same amount of dot. So Basically, this weapon is pretty difficult to scale. We do not scale it, increase its like elemental damage with priority mods. We can't with elemental mods, and we can't with weak point mods, which basically only leaves us with firearm damage increases and crit damage increases. So this is the build that I went for the pistol. If we check our like second setting, you can see that this like circle mod basically came slotted on it already. So I just put on an element there because unfortunately with modding in this game right now, there is only so many mods that you can put in a actual thing before you run out of categories. So there's only so many firearm mods and crit damage mods that we can add before we're kind of forced to go into things like elemental and weak point. And I ended up going for elemental and weak point on the build simply because unfortunately with this weapon, in my opinion, it doesn't quite deal as much outward damage on its like sides where you're going to be killing enemies that you're not shooting at. Like, you're definitely damaging them and you're getting them low, but in 400% dungeons you're still needing to shoot at a lot of targets. And so adding an element and a weak point mod will simply give us more single target DPS while it doesn't increase our elemental or like elemental explosion damage that's going to be hitting enemies to the side. It will give us the most single target damage, and so this is the build that we went with. I personally really like using this weapon on Gley, so I can pick one element to stick with and just firing it out at enemies. This weapon also works really well on Haley, who can buff up its crit chance a ton. And this weapon gets a crazy crit damage multiplier. Right now, we're almost at 7 times damage when it's critting. So this weapon works really, really well on Haley. I personally just like it on Gley a lot. And we made the last 2 videos on Haley, so I thought it'd be kind of boring to make another Haley weapon. But with Gley, we can also rock sharp precision shot, which gives us fire rate, but more importantly, gives us firearm attack. And this firearm attack percentage does actually increase our elemental damage explosions. So this is a best in slot mod, especially if you're going to use it with Gley. Obviously, mental focus is also pretty nice here, but sharp precision shot with the fire rate lets us do a little bit more explosions per second and a bit more DPS per second, rather than just scaling the like elemental stuff. So we ended up with sharp precision shot. If you wanted to use this on a character that is not Gley, you would just simply swap the sharp precision shot for sweeping squad, and then you would be all set. I did want to mention using charge amplification on this weapon, which is actually a net DPS loss on this thing, and that's simply because this is a general rounds weapon, and general rounds weapons get the offering of a 120% increased concentration priority, which is just disgusting. For example, like, this is a much larger consideration on other weapons, like for example, like on the perforator. Just to give you an idea, the concentration priority just on this like ammo type is only a 36% damage increase rather than a 120%. And if we go through the like values, looking at our average or our firearm attack, and then multiplying that by our crit rate and crit damage to get an average damage increase. If we go through the math real quick of it, I was getting a average damage increase, taking our like firearm attack and multiplying that by our average damage increase, which was our crit chance and our crit damage, to get an average. I was getting around 78,000 average hit, versus if we were using our like amplification, we're getting around a 65,000 damage average hit. And so even though it looks nice, the damage of it is simply better on concentration priority. Having a near 7 times multiplier is just ridiculous. And if we take off concentration priority just to see what this looks like, we go from a 7 times damage multiplier. It hurts us a little too much. Lastly, for stat rolls, because honestly this weapon is just not have quite enough DPS for like bossing, I wouldn't recommend getting a damage to Colossus roll. Depending on the character you're going to use it on, like you could go for like rounds or something like that. For me personally, I wanted a flat attack, crit rate, crit damage, and firearm attack for our Gley. I think that's the best thing possible that we could get. Obviously, I don't think like the element matters too much that you're going to be going for, whatever just rolls the highest. But crit rate, crit damage, and firearm attack are all going to be really important. Guys, that's going to do it for the video on the final masterpiece. Closing thoughts on this weapon after fully building it out. I think it's really cool. It's really unique. However, the big issue with this weapon, and you can do this comparison if you bring it into like a 400% dungeon, is it just doesn't kill the enemies on the side of the enemies that you are firing at, as well as something like the Thunder Cage, where the Thunder Cage, you're getting these explosions, and those explosions are doing tons and tons of damage in an AoE that will eliminate whole packs for you. If this weapon had enough damage coming out of the side of it, it's like frontal damage is fine, but it needs, I think, if they like actually wanted to like make this thing really good, they need to buff this, the actual explosion damage. I think if this was like 150 to 100% of the damage going outwards towards other enemies, this could be a absolutely S tier mobbing weapon. However, right now it's kind of a more like for fun option because it is a really cool weapon. It's very visually satisfying. But in terms of like actually like speed running and blasting as fast as you can, it will slow you down compared to some other options. So you guys, that is it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all on the next one. Take care. Peace.